Hello, scholars. So today I'm going to show you how to do a frequency table, and then I'm going to show you how to run a chi-square. Okay, so to run a frequency table in JASP, you're going to go up to the top and you're going to look for frequencies. Now, if this doesn't show up, you can always hit this plus button, and these are all the different types of analyses you can add to your main toolbar, just so you know. So if it doesn't show up here, add it. So I'm going to go to frequencies, and I'm looking for contingency tables. And I want to know, and rows and columns don't really matter, but we can do, I want to know if there's a relationship between, what was it, gender and education. So I can just put gender on one row and education on another row. It doesn't matter. Okay. And then here's my frequency table. With that, I also got a chi-square test. Now I can order that right here. You see it under statistics, x squared, that's a chi-square. Okay. So this just tells me how many, like this is 5 females with a bachelor degree, 15 females that are high school graduates. We've got 32 total females. Okay, that's how to read this. Now for a chi-square, I'm going to show you, and we're going to test the assumption first. So the assumption of a chi-square is that the expected cell count is 5 or more. So I'm going to go to cells over here, and I'm going to make sure observed is checked, and I'm going to add expected. Now that was added. This is the cross tabular. But now I'm going to look at each of these expected counts, and I need to make sure they're 5 or greater. And if you see right here, male for bachelor's degree is not 5 or greater, and neither is female. Okay, female, the expected count for bachelor degree is 3.5, and in male, the expected count is 3.5. So this assumption is violated. So you can Google it, but when the assumption's violated, I recommend a different test. In this case, a Fisher's exact test. All right, but let's say all of these are 5. So we could proceed with our chi-square results. All right, remember what I told you. The alpha is set at 0.05, okay, from my hypothesis testing. So anything greater than 0.05 for the p-value is not significant, and if it's less than 0.05, it is significant. So the question we're asking, is there an association between gender and education? P is 0.182. That is greater than 0.05. There is not a significance. I fail to reject the null hypothesis. Okay. Remember I was talking to you about hypotheses? So here is one for an association. There's not a statistically significant relationship between gender and education in this one. Okay. So I would write out my results in an APA fashion. Okay, so if I wanted to write that in APA 7, I'd right here is I call it the number sentence. It's not actually a number sentence, but x squared. Okay, so chi-squared, x squared, that's the chi-square, equals, and that's the test statistic. And I got that right here under value of chi-square on the test. Okay, and then, let's see, I put the p-value, so it's comma P for probability, remember? P equals 0.182. So what does that mean? It means I fail to reject the null. Remember the language. It's reject the null or fail to reject the null. So I fail to reject the null. There is nothing going on here. So there is not an association between gender and education. Okay, there's my example. Had P been less than 0.05, I'd have said reject the null instead of fail to reject. I'd have said the researcher rejected the null in favor of the alternative. There is an association between gender and education. So that's how to report it in your paper. Remember to place both of these, right? So I discuss the cell count. Don't forget that part. All right. Cross tabulation was run. The expected cell counts revealed violations for both male and female under bachelor's degree. If we were proceeding with this test, I'd recommended the Fisher's exact test, but I want you to proceed with your assignment. So you just interpret your chi-square. The last thing we should discuss about a chi-square is something called effect size. So if you have a little tiny effect, like 1 percentage point or 0.1%, there's no practical application for that. Would you recommend policy changes on everything you're doing for a 1% chance at improvement? So how big of an effect is there? So an effect size in this case would answer how big of an effect is there between gender and education. Now, if I had a significance and I don't, this failed. Okay, so there's no association between gender and education on my data. But let's say there was. P was 0.05 or less. I would order an extra test, a post-hoc test. And in this case, I would pick a phi and Cramer's V. So under statistics, I'll check that box and it'll give me another table. Okay, now the phi coefficient won't work because that's for 2 by 2. 2 groups compared to 2 groups. I have 2 groups, male and female, compared to 3 groups, education. So the phi coefficient, this n means it's not going to happen. So I'll look at Cramer's V. Cramer's V, this is an effect size, 0.231. Now, how do I know if that's a big effect or a small effect? Well, you can go look at these tables here. Here's one. Okay, Cramer's V interpretation table. We have to look at our degrees of freedom. Remember, that's the width and height of your data if we were looking at the histogram. Well, the degrees of freedom is given on our table. Chi-square, the degrees of freedom is 2. By the way, it's the groups n minus n is 3. We have 3 groups minus 1. Okay, so my degrees of freedom is 2. And I had 0.23. Well, that's a medium effect. So in addition, I would say my effect size was a medium effect. Cramer's V equaled 0.23. All right, and you can see Cramer's V ranges from 0 to 1. 0 is no association, 1 is a perfect association. Okay, so if you have a significance, add a Cramer's V and an effect size to that. Okay, and then it would be written. Let me show you how it'd be written. right here. Okay. So remember, but you only do that Cramer's V. That's called a post-hoc test. Post-hoc tests are tests that I run after my main inferential test and add on based on the results that I have. Okay? Okay. Reach out if you have any questions.